Hello, friends.
And
Hello,
still a
homeschoolers.
Hollowbody
Yeah.
in 63.
Hi, guys.
Because they'd already introduced the SG version by then.
George Gruhn, Ernest, two old friends of mine. I've been bugging Eric for how long now, Eric?
Quite a while. I don't even know how long.
Eric has a company called Abalone Vintage, and he is known worldwide for being an absolute expert on the rare and coveted Gibson Hollowbody doublenecks of the 50s, late 50s, early 60s. Less than 100 of these ever made, yeah?
Well, they did a 12-string, they did an octave and a mandolin, and then they did the bass. Okay. So combined, all of them was probably under 100.
Under 100.
That's what the ledgers say, but I suspect the number's higher than that because I've been tracking these since the 1980s. So I've got photos of about probably 60 total.
Okay.
So well, what are the chances I would have a photo of that many?
And you've owned most of them.
No.
Yeah,
I wish.
You currently have 7, right?
Well, the 7 that I have is split between the Hollowbody and the SG. So 3 of them are the SG. But the most of the Hollowbodies I ever had at one time was 7.
Yeah.
And that was 1, 612, and 6 of the EMS in both the mandolin and octave versions.
George, I have known you've always been a fan. You've always told me to buy these, and you've always been a fan. I know you love these guitars. What do you love about them?
Well, they sound really, really good. I think that they are one of the best sounding electric guitars that Gibson ever made.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But their construction is absolutely unique to these instruments. There is no 6-string or any other standard model single neck Gibson that is built like this. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out why Gibson came up with a completely unique construction and then used it only on double necks, because when they heard how good it sounds with the carved spruce top, holes, but it has bent sides, it has a back, there's no bracing on the underside of the top, it's just thick, it's flat on the inside, but it's carved on the outside.
Yeah, fully hollow.
It's fully hollow, but you can crank it as loud as a solid body guitar. The tone is unique and absolutely marvelous tone. It looks neat. I can figure no reason why it didn't occur to them to make a single neck version.
Right.
But they didn't.
And these were all custom order. You couldn't, you had to pay for this before they built it, right?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
They were in the catalog.
Okay.
I doubt seriously that you had to pay for it, that no dealer ever had one.
Yeah.
There's one interesting thing that I found out last week that I didn't know, but I gave the serial number to Matt Kaler at Gibson, and he ran the number, and he sent me a photograph of the serial number in the ledgers, and there's 4 of them consecutive serial numbers, and that tells me, at least from my way of thinking, that they probably had some left over that they just put together just to get rid of them. Wow. And they all sequentially, because I can't imagine any reason why a custom-made guitar that you'd have 4 of them sequentially, just boom, 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 boom.
And what year was that? 61?
61. It was like maybe mid-year or something, but those consecutive service, and I'm sure Matt's got his own opinion on that too, because my God, he's Gibson's historian.
Sure. Yeah.
He knows that stuff. And I haven't run that idea past him, so I don't know what he would think about
the
that.
Gibson ledgers tell you, among other things, shipping ledgers, and some are there's shipping ledgers, there's manufacturing ledgers. They're not the same.
Right.
But a lot of what really went on in designing was never recorded. Right. There's no literature. So how these decisions were really made, that it's not on paper anywhere.
Right.
And most of the people who made these decisions have one thing in common, and that is they be dead.
Right.
So that's a long distance call to try to reach out to them and ask why did they do this.
Yes.
I don't think that there's any way that we will ever truly know what went on in their mind.
From my perspective, they had to be kind of motivated by what was the music that was going on at the time. I guess you have like Western swing, and then you had the Joe Maphis and, you know, the octave guitar he was using. I'm not sure what year he was doing that. If he was, he had to have been doing that before this. But the Mosrite,
Jimmy Rivers,
that sort of stuff, had to have had some. Because the earliest Mosrite, you know, was also hollow.
Sure.
So,
well, keep in mind that Gibson also did double neck Hawaiians,
right,
and solid body, and some of those things were actually not really truly solid.
Right.
But the EH-150 Gibson,
right,
lap steel looks like a solid, but it's not.
Right.
And they did have an equivalent double neck.
Okay.
And there was even a double neck acoustic Gibson.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's insane.
And so there's a history of double necks.
What is the first year of these? 58, yeah?
58, but I guess the prototypes were done in 57, because it seems like, you know, the two white ones that appeared for the NAMM show, I think they were done in 57.
Have you seen
the earliest 58s, and I don't know when this changed, but there are a lot of them that don't even have serial numbers, so I assume those are 58s.
Well, most of these double necks don't have serial numbers, yeah?
I would say it's probably maybe half and half.
Okay.
I think when it's somewhere in, you know, there are 58s with serial numbers.
Okay.
But
Eric, your story that you told me a while ago of how you became obsessed with these is fascinating.
Oh, it's insane.
Would you please tell us the story and don't leave out a single detail, okay?
I'll try to.
George doesn't even know this story, okay?
So, I'm from Columbia, South Carolina, and I don't know if it was my buddy Mike Four or who it was, but somebody told me that there was a dealer in town named Johnson's Music Studio. And I was just a new convert to vintage guitars, having followed, you know, I was listening to a lot of Van Halen and Cheap Trick and Rush and Queen. That was kind of the bands I listened to the most. But I was heavily influenced by Rick Nielsen, because Rick Nielsen had all of the cool guitars. I mean,
sure.
You know, and he took them out and played them too, which was kind of an anomaly, because most of the guys would take, you know, leave their good stuff at home and then take, you know, other stuff out on the road. But he didn't do that, you know. And so I saw Cheap Trick in '79 at the Township in Columbia. And I literally had never even I'd heard of the band. I'd seen them in magazines, but I never heard their music until actually driving to the show. And I was like, that's pretty good. Instant fan. Absolutely. It's still one of my favorite bands.
Yeah.
Blew me away. So that probably more than anything influenced my guitar appreciation.
Sure.
So I got hit to this place called Johnson's Music Studio. And I went down there, and when I walked in the door, I was just out of high school, so I'm like 17, 18. Okay. So this is like 82-ish, somewhere in there. And I walk in, he was in the bad part of town. He was at Maine at Monticello in, you know, the hood.
Right.
But and he'd been there forever, and he was in the coolest old building, because the building was a converted fire station. And the building was oval, and it actually had a courtyard in the middle that if you would not know it had a courtyard unless you walked through the building.
Cool.
So he actually had multiple bays of the fire department, and he actually had teaching studios on the other side of the courtyard. So anyway, first time I walk in there, I look up, and there's a Fender Music Lander, brand new, never sold, from like the 60s, on a shelf, literally. Like, and I'm like looking at it, and I'm looking at the price tag, and it's like, is that $300? And I'm like, if that's $300, I'm buying it, because they're $800 at the time or something.
The babes.
And I look at it, and it's $3,000, and I was like, whoa, okay. Yeah. So anyway, I get to looking around. He has like a Vox Super Beetle amp, brand new, never sold. Okay. Had all this cool stuff. Fender Electric 12 Candy Apple Red, brand new, never sold. In fact, most of the guitars out were guitars from the 60s predominantly, that were never sold. ES320,
wow.
natural with the tags, never sold.
That just means he priced them where no one would buy them.
Exactly. So anyway, yeah, and if you, and Louis was just a curmudgeon. I mean, he just was. And if you found something that you wanted to buy, if it was like, $1,000, you'd go in with the cash. You go, no, it's $1,200. This is like, so you weren't going to win on that deal. You just weren't.
Sliding scale of prices.
Yeah. But he had it all. He had vintage guitars, he had amps, he had effects, he had posters, he had displays, he had signs, he had everything there. It was literally like a museum. And it had the smell, which you just like.
Great old music store smell. I love it. Man.
But anyway, the guitars that he didn't have on display were lined up at the back of the store. So when you walked in directly in front of you, you could see all the cases lined up. And he had a pet chain through all of them, which most of the guitars on the floor had pet chains through the headstock, literally in between the nut and the strings. And if you wanted to look at a guitar, he would have to fish the whole thing out. Take the lock off, fish the whole thing out, and then pull the guitar out. So consequently, he never did. So, even get the look at playing a guitar was, an anomaly. But anyway, there was a period where Louis, he went in the hospital to do something. And his daughter was running the shop. And she was just like, yeah, if you want to play something, play it. So this was literally sitting on the showroom floor. This is 1982.
New old stock.
This would have been probably about that time, maybe 83, maybe 84. When I saw this, when I got
been sold,
she actually let me pull it out and take a look at it.
Yeah.
And the thing that's crazy was when I was there that day, I had my 35mm camera with me, and I did not snap a photo. And it was mostly because it was so dark, because the building had like the old poles that came down with the flange light, and incandescent, and it was just so dark. I thought, well, it's just not going to turn, it just wouldn't turn out unless you used a flash, and I don't think I had a flash. So I should have gotten her to take me outside and got a photo with it that day, but I didn't. So anyway, that guitar just, when I saw it, I, held it, looked at it, I was just like...
It had never been sold at that point. It was new old stock?
Yes and no.
Okay.
What had happened with, and this is what the daughter told me. I don't think Louis told me this story, because Louis was, like I say, he was a bit of a curmudgeon. He just wouldn't tell you stuff. But she told me, if I'm recalling this correctly, that someone had bought it on time and couldn't afford it, and after a couple of months turned it back in.
I see.
So it basically was played a couple of months, couldn't afford it, just gave it back to Louis, and that was that.
Right.
I guess he financed it.
Yeah.
So anyway, but it sat there so if that was 61, then it was back there probably in 61 or 62, and it sat there until when I saw it in 82.
20 years.
And then around 87, a friend of mine was actually working there at the time, helping Louis out on Saturdays. And anyway, he was talking with Louis, and Louis told him that he would sell that for $3,000. And I was like, wow. I'm like, this was in 1987. That was a lot of money. I mean, you could buy a couple of used cars for that.
Sure. Yeah.
I think my Chevette cost $600,
Right.
So anyway, we sold our house in Lexington, and I was going to buy it. So I literally had the money, and my buddy, I told him, yeah, I'm going to get that thing. I'll give you the money, you can, whatever. And literally he came back to me and said, Louis sold it last week. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Damn.
And he said, yeah, he sold it to some guy from Fayetteville. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was completely just beside myself, because I had looked forward to buying that, when you're that young. 5 years is a long time. It's like, it seems like an eternity,
Yeah.
So
and you were thinking about it.
And so
every day.
so I missed it, and it was just like I just thought about it and thought about it, and it just like it stuck in my craw. It became my kryptonite. It was just it just annoyed me. So fast forward a couple of years, I'm actually here in Nashville at the guitar show that used to be at the Ramada Inn that the Four Amigos, I guess now they're the Three Amigos, put on. And Larry Briggs had a case like that sitting on his table, closed, and it was one of the weirdest feelings. I walked up to him, and I literally, before he even opened the case, I'm like, this is mine. I haven't even seen it, and this whatever this is mine. I just had this weird. So it happened to me twice.
Wow.
So anyway, I asked him, I said, so what's in the case? And he goes, 3/4 scale Explorer. And I was like, so anyway, it ended up being a black EMS, like a 61. And I opened the case, and I'm like, and it was $7,500. And I had just gotten a Nick Lucas, and I worked out a deal where I gave him the Nick Lucas in like $3,500 or something. Right. And he actually held it for me till like the next show. Nice. Like I gave him the Nick Lucas, and then I paid him. I think it was at Dallas or something. 6 months later. But that was the first one. and black, which is a great color on those anyway. And it was just an amazing instrument, and it's just everything about it just completely fascinated me.
Black,
and everything about it.
EMS 1235.
Yes.
Mandolin.
It was a mandolin, and it had a Bigsby on it.
Oh wow!
But everything about that guitar just fascinated me. I mean,
also a lot of what they called a mandolin really wasn't.
Right.
Yeah.
And I did one time have one that really did have an 8-string mandolin neck and a tenor neck.
I've seen that. I got a photo of that.
Yeah.
That was one of the first photos I got.
It's a real weird combination.
Absolutely.
So
most rockers wouldn't know what to do with it.
Was
tenor
there
guitar and an 8-string standard mandolin?
Right. Was there like about a half a dozen different configurations they could have been sold in?
The strange thing about the EMS is they are all over the place. I had one that had a birdland on the bottom. So the 6-string was a birdland, and then the top was a mandolin. And take for example like Robbie Robertson's. He's got the red one with the round cutaway, which is like the rare body shape of those.
Yes.
That was like the last ones made. His has a guitar headstock, but it has mandolin, setup on it. I don't think there's another one like that.
Wow.
If it's got a guitar headstock, it's an octave guitar, and if it's got a mandolin headstock, it's a mandolin. But his has a guitar headstock with mandolin tuners. Now, is it original? I don't know. I don't know anybody that's even seen that guitar.
Is that the weirdest one you've ever seen?
That's the red one. There's so many. What he's described is probably the weirdest. The tenor with the mandolin. I mean, it is.
How strange.
Yeah, there's a photo. I don't know if it's from your shop or whatever, but I think it's David Grissom's playing it. But that's like kind of an iconic photo that's been around for 40 years.
We had it. But it was a tenor 4-string guitar neck and a standard 8-string mandolin neck.
Yeah, see, I would buy that just to have, because for me, the one-off stuff is the stuff that gets me out of bed in the morning. I mean, when I see that stuff, I just that's what I go after.
The interesting thing is, of course, the fingering for a tenor guitar. They're both tuned. Tenor guitar and mandolin are tuned in fifths, so if somebody knows how to play one, they can play the other.
Yeah.
Because they're not tuned as a standard guitar, they're tuned.
Right.
A tenor guitar is actually tuned like a viola, and the mandolin is tuned like a violin. So
I think maybe Larry Briggs even owned that one at one time, because he's talked about it because he told me that was the most useful one for him, I think, because he does play mandolin. So
it's crazy. You said George, you know about this? The guy apparently that carved all these spruce tops on these was at the Gibson factory, was deaf. Is this true?
The story goes that one employee basically did those, and he was Gibson's master wood carver. So he carved a lot of the hand arch tops, and he was supposedly put on that project, I assume, to kind of ride out his retirement, because I believe he was like 80 years old when he was doing that.
Right.
And one of the other guitars I'll show you today is probably the last EMS that was ever made. And if you look at the way the binding is scraped, you'll go, that's it. This looks like the end of the road. Very, very rudimentary.
I saw an article about the guy a while back. I can't remember his name though, but he was kind of like a famous Gibson employee. Yeah.
I remember going to the factory in 1969, and I saw that guy doing they had just introduced the Citation model, and he tuned the tops, but he was deaf. He was doing it with a meter.
Wow.
So
I need to talk to Randy Wood, because Randy has been with Gibson back then.
Randy Tutt and I went up.
Oh, no kidding. Okay. Well, he's told me a little bit about that. Yeah.
And I don't know how much Randy would remember.
A lot.
There's times I've asked Randy about things that I thought he'd remember, and nope, no recollection. And I can't reach Tutt. It said that would be a long distance call. Yeah. He's dead.
Yeah.
So, if you ever want to take a road trip to go see Randy Wood, it would be worth it. Because he's literally been on my to-do list forever. Just go down, because he's got stories a mile long, and they're all great. But he's told me a lot of things about Gibson's repair department back then, that just stuff that make your hair
horrible.
Go. It just make your hair stand on
guys whose entire job was fucking up every guitar they touched.
That's the story he said.
Is it true that
ruined everything?
Is Randy Wood credited?
We saw what they were doing, and it was horrible.
So he basically the first guy to figure out how to do a neck set. Is this true?
No, John Lundberg was doing those so-called California neck sets.
Okay.
Randy was one of the first, though, to undo a dovetail.
Okay.
And actually, see, the previous, they slipped the back and scrunch it together. They weren't actually taking the dovetail out. They didn't take the neck out. They just were they were literally undo the back seam, scrunch it together, glue it, and then trim the so-called excess wood and made the back shorter than it had been before. That was not a good thing to do.
Butchery.
Randy was one of the first to do a neck set where he could take the neck out at the dovetail, and still was pretty crude. He'd cut through he'd cut the board at the 14th fret, and then take a palette knife and take that part of the board that was over the body, lift it up, expose the dovetail, pour some water into the dovetail, stick a soldering iron into it. And, we would not do that now. Because once in a while you end up cracking the heel. No, it was the way we do neck sets is so much better now. But Randy was the first one I've known who took a neck out and usually got it out in one piece, but not always. But still, it was the work that he did in '69 and '70 was pretty crude compared to what we do today. The techniques are so much better. Martin had the official statement that a dovetail is forever and you can't take it out. I mean, they even write letters that you can't do it. You can hardly do the neck set. They just take the frets out, plane the fingerboard where it's paper thin by the nut and full depth by the body, and then refret it, and then shave the bridge down. And by the time they got done, to do it right after that, you still needs a neck set, but now it needs a new fingerboard and a new bridge too. But Gibson's approach was just repair. They didn't do repairs. They took whatever was the closest equivalent new part and simply put it on whether it matched or not. But if a neck set was bad, they'd simply take a hacksaw, saw the neck off at the body, then chisel the dovetail out and put a new neck on that didn't match the original neck. And I also saw one thing when we were there. There's a Gibson L12 pre-war, and the fingerboard had divots in it, so they removed the original fingerboard and put a new fingerboard on, but the original board was wider and had nice pearl double parallelograms, and the new board had pearloid mother of toilet seat double parallelograms, and it was narrower, so they just took a rasp and simply cut the neck down to fit the new improper board.
Wow.
And then they'd refinish the neck. I mean,
with all
everything they touched, they ruined, but Martin did plenty of horrendous things too. It's like Red Smiley's guitar went back to the factory in the 50s and had a crack in the back, so they put a new D28 back on a D45 because they weren't doing pearl work at the time. But that strays a bit away from double necks.
Amazing.
Well, the repair stuff I've seen from Gibson, to me, it looks like they gave whoever did the repair the autonomy to decide how they were going to do whatever it is they were going to do.
Right.
So they're all over the place. There's some that are just completely botched, and sometimes they did a pretty good job. So some of it depends on the era too.
Totally.
But
the repairs
sometimes
that they did in '69 were uniform.
Well,
getting back to double necks, this carve is very much like a Rossmeisel carve.
Sure.
Rickenbacker,
And it's like but Rossmeisel did it before Rick.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Roger Rossmeisel came, he was German. And he came and worked for a while with Mosrite, and he worked with Rickenbacker for a while, and later he worked for Fender for a while. And this type carve, see, it's quite flat here, and then it just comes sharply down. That doesn't really look like hand carving. That looks like it's done on a machine.
Take us on a tour to this guitar, Eric.
Pardon me?
Take us on a tour to this guitar, if you don't mind.
But, you got
Show us what we got here.
It has a bent sides and a flat back. It's not an arched back, it's a flat back. And it's bent sides And there's curved linings in it. The necks are
Flat back.
They're dovetailed necks, and the way this thing is constructed is totally unlike anything that Gibson had done previously.
Look how thick that
and
binding
different
is.
than anything Gibson had done.
70s.
Well, they did arch-top guitars and even Les Pauls that had the thick binding and the cutaway.
Right.
So
These are all different. What do you notice about this one, Eric, that's different than the rest? Maybe
Well, there are a few things about this that I've never seen on
slide that back
another
for me,
one.
George. I'm about to drop this thing.
I'll get
I need help. I'm just a man. So this is probably different than other 612s you've had, yeah? In a lot
Well,
of ways.
this one is unusual in that and here's the thing, it says 61, and you know, how many 61s have I seen in the flesh? Well, 612s, that's it. I haven't seen another one. All the other ones I've seen have been 50s, but there are two things about this particular instrument that are different. One is it has wide fret wire. This is typically on these, you see narrow fret wire, even into the 60s. So, you know, apparently when the guy who was building these, he had all the materials that he would have used set aside for himself. So he wasn't going and grabbing like what's the current fingerboard. He was using whatever he had set aside. So this actually has wide wire, which is very unusual. And then the second thing is it actually has the original nut material. It's not bone. Most time you see one of those that actually have bone nuts. But
Really?
in fact, I've never seen an EMS that didn't have a carved bone nut. So that's why, I don't know.
But what was the nut made out of on a 1960 335, George? Just like nylon.
Well,
right?
it should be.
Just like that.
Well, they call it nylon.
Yeah.
I don't think it is. I think it's, and I've never told anybody this. I think it's actually micarta. I think it's undyed micarta, because micarta is an epoxy that basically you can put any kind of, it's a resin that you can put any kind of material in it, whether it's fiberglass or whatever. So Gibson did use micarta later on in the 70s. That's the stuff. A lot of people look at it and they go, well, it looks like bone. No, that's micarta. It actually looks like fiberglass that's in it.
Okay.
Like circuit board material.
Sure, yeah.
So the problem with plastics, and I've actually gone around with Matt about this at Gibson, is that if you change one chemical component of plastic, you can now call it something completely different. So like if you had an anti-static property of plastic, now it's something completely different. You can market it as another product. So when people call those nylon, I don't think they are. I think they're actually, because if you just take a nylon and you drop it on the table as a ping, if you drop micarta and you drop that, they sound completely identical. So I think it's actually that.
Okay. Fascinating. Let's look at some of the other ones. We've got 7 double necks here. So I'm going to stop the camera, and we're going to bust out another one. I'll be right back. Okay. You guys, the homeschoolers, have seen this one plenty. 58.
Yep.
I got this from Eric, several years ago now?
At least 3.
3 years ago. I remember when I saw it at the guitar show and you had it and you opened the case. I actually heard that sound that you see in movies where they go, oh. You know that sound?
Oh, yeah.
It was like a religious experience, and man, this guitar is fantastic. I had it refretted by dear Andy Jellison, remember? Andy, we worked here at George for a long time. I had a custom bridge made for this, to get this six-string neck and tune. You know, this top is, compensated. Yeah, because that's how crazy I am about trying to get stuff in tune.
Well, your job does
Yeah,
require
it does. It does. But what do you notice about this one as opposed to some of the others you've had, Eric?
Well, let's talk about the EMS for a second. What makes these so special? There's a couple of things about this that, let's be honest. When it comes to these double necks, it's really not about the mandolin, and it's really not about the octave guitar, and it's really not about the bass, and it's really not about the 12-string. It's about that 6-string side, just what George was saying earlier, that that's where the magic happens. So that is the primary focus of the guitar. If you're using it to track, play, whatever, that's the thing about it that's amazing. The great thing about these is that mandolin neck is actually angled out of the way, whereas on the 12, it's not. So if you pick one of these up to play it, it feels more ergonomic than the 612s. Not only that, it's considerably more lightweight. So these usually average about a little over 10, 11 pounds. Yeah. Very comfortable guitar to play. But having that neck on the mandolin side angled back is what it's all about. The other thing too is, and I pointed out this to you earlier, is the case on these are thicker. And I didn't even realize that until I got the 612 last week, because the other 612 I had did not have the original case. It was purchased without a case.
Amazing.
And this is literally an inch thicker than the 612, and it's because that mandolin neck is angled back.
I'll be damned. So,
and also too, your Bigsby, you got one of those rare Bigsbys that's cut down too.
Yeah, it's like prototype looking.
Yeah, you do see that on specific custom-made Gibson instruments, but it's very rare. And yours also has that weird arm with the little football thing on the end, and that is to like 56, 57, and it's also gold, and they buffed the gold off of it. So, you know, and you got the photo of it back in the day with the guy with the Bigsby on it. So there's no question. Yeah, there's no question that's original.
Homeschoolers have thought that this was the one that the guy from Love owned, but it's not the one.
Nah.
This is a different guitar.
I've actually owned 3 just like this.
Have you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I sold one to Neil Sean, and then one ended up going to Songbird.
So I've had several of those. At one point, I was over at Shop Jackson's place, Showbud. This was in the 70s, early 70s, and he had one. It was a 612 Hollowbody, and he had stripped the finish and painted it white. And I asked him, do you own it? Oh, yeah. Well, why'd you refinish it? Well, there were some scratches. I would have been real interested if you just left it alone, but it's refinished.
Wow.
I don't want it anymore.
Yeah, no serial number on
And he
this
says,
one.
George, what's your problem? If you don't like it this way, I'll put the original finish back on for you.
He said
just
that.
never
Did he
got
say
it.
what color it was originally?
Sunburst.
Oh, wow.
What he meant is he'd sunburst.
Yeah, right.
What he said was, if you don't like it this way, I'll put the original finish back on.
Man.
And something unrelated. Why are you wearing a watch that doesn't work, but the hands just flop off?
Because that's just how I am. It's what Tommy at my house watch. I can make it whatever time I want that way, you know?
It's just
I can go back in time. I literally can go back in time to like 9 a.m.
It doesn't
It's a
work.
fashion statement, George.
Yeah, actually, this is my watch now,
There
so
you
it's
go.
like
I
everybody
know,
else.
but I wouldn't wear a watch that the hands would flop and move every time.
All right, we're moving on to we're moving on to the next guitar. We're going on to the third guitar.
This is one of the 2 craziest ones you'll ever see.
All right, this is our third one we're looking at today. I can't believe you brought all these down here.
This
You need a
is-
roadie.
This is probably the last carved top that they made, because it looks like it shipped in like 63-ish, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Because it's got features from that era.
Whoa. Holy shit.
I mean, this is genuinely a complete one-off.
George, you ever have one like this?
Nope.
Mm-hmm. Man, that is crazy. So we got a mandolin and it's a tenor and a mandolin, yeah? That's what we
No, interesting story. That's what I thought.
Okay.
I thought it was a tenor too, and then when I bought it online, drove to New
It's
Hampshire.
shorter than a tenor scale.
It is. It's a mandolin. It's a 4 and an 8 mandolin is what it is. But when I bought it, I thought it was a tenor. And then when I got it home, I measured it, and they're the same. I'm like, it's an optical illusion.
Look at that, the original paperwork and shit. That's so cool. Wow.
Yeah, and the hang tag on this had something completely different on it. So it's like 355, whatever. And Gibson would occasionally do that.
Well,
I've seen
there are
some.
folks who play electric mandolin 4-string and don't, because it's hard to get the intonation really as good with 8 strings. I know Sam Bush likes to play on a 4-string electric mandolin, but on an acoustic, he's going to use an 8-string.
What you got there, man?
Here's some things to kind of go over to talk about the unique things on this instrument.
63.
Because this thing, well, it's got BAFs.
What's the final year of Hollow?
Well, whenever they shipped it, I guess.
This is it?
I mean, whenever they shipped it. I mean, I don't know of one later than this.
It's interesting who
63.
would use it.
Right, yeah. Well, here's what I think happened. If you look at
Hand
these.
chisel neck pickup cavity there.
Yeah, that you see that a lot with prototypes and first ones that they made. You would see a hand chiseled thing like that. So if you think about it, this thing is a one-off in that, like, there's not another pickguard like this. So that had to be hand done. The pickup, this is the one that's chiseled in. So there are things about this that you're just not going to see on something else.
Would you call this a 4-string PAF? It's a patent number, probably. Yeah.
No, they're both PAFs.
They're both, yeah.
Here again, going back to what I was saying earlier about the double necks, that they had that stuff kind of squirreled away.
Yeah.
You don't, I think the predominantly number, like going way into the 60s, I think that they're all PAFs, mostly.
Okay.
But you never see a double cream and you never see a zebra. Never seen one. All I've ever owned and anyone else that I've tracked, never seen those. So I suspect all those pickups were set aside in a special thing and they were all put in, and they're all roughly from the same era. That's what it seems like to me.
And they're all double blacks.
Yep, every one.
You've never seen anything
and then
with
this
double
is
blacks.
actually 6 pole pieces, but they just didn't drill the covers out. So that's actually, it has 6.
Well, it looks like it's virtually unplayed.
Well, it was the
That is amazing. That's 6. There's 6 poles in there.
yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, I've got some great photos of that, but going back to this document, what's really odd about this, well, for one thing, it's got 2 serial numbers.
Wow.
So each I guess those were production necks. They just pulled them out and just made, But this thing, I think, sat around the factory for years. I think they actually did start it in the 50s, but I don't think they finished it until probably about 63. And I think really they just wanted to dump it, like get rid of the thing, put it together, get it out of here. But think about it. You've got 2 pickups, but you got 2 toggle switches. Why? When Gibson made these, they didn't, people think they just, drilled those out. They didn't. They actually routed those. So they used a small router bit and then rounded the potentiometer and the toggle switch holes.
Unbelievable.
And they pre-did that. So when those bodies were made, those were already there. So rather than plug it, they just put 2 switches. And I think what they tried to do was, I think they tried to make it so that each switch would function the same, and they just couldn't figure it out. So if you look at the ground wire, they had 4 ground wires on it. So I think what happened was they kept wiring it and they couldn't get the wiring figured out, and they kept pulling the harness and putting it back in and pulling the harness. And at some point, I think they must have scratched it, because if you look at the toggle switch, you have white paint in there, but it's clearly original. So I think what they did was, I think they accidentally scratched it, pulling the harness out so many times, and then it sat around the factory, and at some point they just touched it up, put it together, and just got it out of there just to get rid of it, and then dumped it to somebody in about 63. So it's
latest Hollowbody double neck. No.
So yeah, but if you look at it's got double line cloisons, and then the truss rod cover is like what you see more mid 60s.
Sure.
So it's
I noticed that. That's cool. God, dude, this is so cool.
Yeah, but this was funny. This actually turned up on an online auction in New Hampshire, and I literally at the last minute found out about it and ended up buying it, and then drove to New Hampshire to get it. Typically, when I get one of these, I don't want to ship them because it's not something that you can replace. No. So usually, if I close the deal on one, I'm going to drive and get it.
Yeah, right. Dude, amazing. And this case smells particularly good. Did you notice that? Really great smell. All right, let's move on. Okay, Eric just said this is the cherry on top. This must be something very special.
Oh, it is.
Let's see.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is the first Gibson solid body electric guitar ever made.
Whoa. Wow. 2 completely different kinds of fretboard material. That's amazing. Is that it?
This is from 1938. So, yeah, pick it up. Serial number 802. In fact, Joe Spann actually ran the serial number on this and found it in the ledgers, and it shipped in 38.
Wow.
And it has a screwed on back.
Yep.
Have you taken the back off?
Yes. And the serial number is also on the back too.
Because typically the ones, the lap steels that have the screwed on back are hollow in there.
That's largely hollow, but usually the neck block on these stops about here. This one stops all the way down the pickup. So it's literally over 1/3 actually solid wood.
Okay, but it's still not a fully solid guitar.
It's not fully solid just because pickups. But here, I want you to hold that.
Great weight. That's great weight, man. That's
17
cool.
pounds.
You you would think it'd be more for what it is. It's not bad.
Spanish neck and a Hawaiian neck.
Right, so it's a Get Steel. It's a Get Steel decades before there actually was a Get Steel.
Man, great looking headstock.
But this particular instrument was shipped to Belgium before World War II. And the guy who owned it was, I think it was called Tony the Guitar Guy. and he would play like little parlor things for, you know, ladies groups and things like that. And he ordered the guitar and it was shipped.
It's interesting what a fat neck
Yeah.
the Spanish neck is. It's pretty
Lord,
fat.
yeah, it is. Well, this is just a regular old round neck like you're
Yeah, it's
supposed
a
to play.
Spanish. Yes, it's Spanish.
But that's like a ball bat.
But think about this too, though. I mean, think about what else was out at the time. Here's what we should do. Let me go grab something. We just keep filming that.
It's not
Yep.
their typical neck contour, because look at how fat that is.
It really is.
It's
I mean, that's like bigger than any Gibson acoustic I've ever seen.
George just happened to have the thing that probably aesthetically looks the closest to it. And whilst this is a lap steel, they did do an actual guitar version of this. Yeah.
He did a Spanish
And that
neck
is
version.
as close as you're going to get as far as the design goes. Very similar.
Wow. And this is 38 as well, you reckon?
That's about 39.
Yeah, somewhere in there, 38, 39.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but actually,
Man, that is crazy. Look at this
the
cool
Slingerland
case.
had a solid body, electric, round neck, Spanish neck guitar in the catalog before Les Paul's log. So Les Paul's comments about how he invented solid bodies, it's not true.
Is that bullshit?
Les Paul would claim he invented the light bulb if he thought he could get away with it. He was not noted for being truthful.
Okay. All right.
So now this is what makes it all worthwhile right there.
Oh, man.
Because this is the original guy who ordered the instrument from Gibson in Belgium.
Good looking chap he was.
Yeah. He, I suspect this photo was originally for like a lobby card sort of a thing where you could put out in the lobby of a hotel or something like that.
Yeah.
But amazing story that the guitar really even survived. If you think about it.
When you got the guitar, it came with the picture.
Yes. I had the frame done, but yes, I did. I got the photograph with the guitar. Believe it or not, I actually bought that off of eBay.
You bought the picture?
No, I bought the guitar. Off
Oh,
eBay.
I was gonna say, yeah, they all came together, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, the guy who actually sold it was a dealer in France, a vintage dealer. And he put in the text that he thought that it was the first Gibson solid body ever made.
Right.
And when I read that, I was like, it is. And I think I was the only person that even bid on it.
Wow.
And I was stunned. Because I was actually trying to buy another double neck at the time.
Right.
And took the money that I was going to use for that one and ended up buying this one.
Damn.
And I was pretty stoked to get it.
So cool.
Because it's something that, like I say, could have gotten lost to history.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, the reason it kind of did lose its way for a while was, World War II happened a year later.
Right.
This thing probably went under a bed.
Sure.
We emerged from World War II. It's a different world.
That's right.
So this thing just kind of like got
How
lost
many
in
of
time.
these things that you have do you actually really play?
Most of my guitars I actually do play. Now this past year,
I can't
2024,
see very much utility.
you would be surprised how good this sounds. Hey, take this thing out on a session. You'd
Charlie
be
Christian,
stunned.
man.
You would be stunned how good
sure.
that. Dude, you can rock out with that thing.
Oh, dude, that's amazing.
But last year I played probably the least guitar I've played since I was a teenager. I might have put an hour in on the guitar the entire year.
Yeah, okay.
I had a very difficult year, but
It still gets down to why, with the design of the hollow body that is a unique sounding, phenomenal sounding instrument, why did they never make a single neck version?
right.
It makes absolutely no sense. They went to considerable effort to design something
right.
that was absolutely unique and used it only on double necks, but they sound great, but
I've
the
often
marketability
Yeah.
was very, very
I've
limited.
often
Not
said
very many
that
people wanted a double neck.
if anybody asks you what a double neck sounds like that, I say it sounds like if you took a Les Paul and an acoustic guitar and you put it in a bag and shook it up. That's kind of what you got. So it's like a Les Paul, but with this just kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't sound hollow. It doesn't sound like a 335.
Yeah.
It just has this kind of chunky, woody. kind
Yeah,
of
very
tone.
chunky and
They're
woody.
extremely good sound.
Yeah.
And
Do we know who invented
how
the
could
double neck?
they make
Like,
it
who designed it?
and not realize it sounded good?
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Matt-
went to all this trouble to make these things, they did not sell well because they're still,
Right.
most people would view them as awkward. Not very many people want a double neck, and
Right.
certainly some of these neck combinations, like when you have a bass and a mandolin.
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
Why would anybody want
There
that
is actually I haven't seen it. I know it's in Japan, but there is a EMS that has a 12 string on the bottom and a mandolin on the top. And they just did weird stuff like that.
Well, they
And-
also did some that just had, I've seen one that had 2 standard 6-string necks.
Yep.
You could use them in different tunings.
Right. That's actually very usable
That's
for me
cool.
anyway.
Yeah.
It is usable. You can have one set up for bottleneck
Yeah.
and open
Absolutely.
tuning, and then you can have the other
So you've
one
seen Hollowbody
standard.
double neck 6.6 like that?
Yes,
Wow.
I've seen one.
Wow.
And it was that way with 2 standard 6-string necks. But that actually makes perfectly good sense to have one in an open tuning for bottleneck. With
If I
heavy
had one
strings.
built, that's what I would have
Right,
made. A double
right.
And
6.
that's
Yeah.
actually useful. But many of them are combinations that are just goofy.
Yeah.
And even there, most people would rather have a single neck guitar.
Yeah.
And this is a design that would work beautifully. It's easy enough to envision what it would look like if it were a single neck. They never did it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe 10 years ago, they did design a guitar that was kind of based off of a double cut. What's the guy that had the
Johnny A?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was based on a Johnny A.
Well,
but
it
they
doesn't-
kind of got
no, it's not built like it at all.
well,
Structurally,
they
it's totally
put, right, but they
different.
put a spruce top. They did do one with a spruce top, and they tried to kind of pay homage to it, but
It's not even remotely similar.
it fell short. There's no question about it.
Mm.
It was a different guitar, but it was
The other
not.
thing
It was
about
not
those
that.
Johnny A guitars is that the rhythm pickup's in the wrong position as far as the harmonics, so that the rhythm pickup sound is for shit.
Right.
Because the pickup should be
I love it. I
in
love
the
it.
position of where a 24th fret would be,
Right.
and it isn't on that. So it has a
Let's
good
get him
enough
over here.
sound.
Call Johnny A.
If you don't put the pickup in the right position where the harmonics fall correctly,
Right.
it doesn't sound good.
Right.
Oh man. All right, get another one out.
I think
Let's
that's
get
it.
another. Oh, we have. That's it.
I think that's it.
Oh, you brought 4?
I
Or
brought
You
3.
brought 3. Oh,
Yeah.
amazing. Oh, dude. Okay. I guess we can wrap up. What are some final thoughts? What are some final
thought is,
thoughts?
why didn't they make a single neck? It would have sold well. And it still would sell well if they did it, but nobody at Gibson has ever thought of making the same guitar with just one neck.
Yeah.
I
Man,
guess we
would
need to start a write-in
sell.
campaign.
we could.
It would be one of the best sounding electrics
Absolutely.
they ever
Absolutely.
made.
Okay, but then the question is
And they
what?
don't do it.
But then here that raises a question. Then what body shape do they use? Do they use like a ES 140T or do they use like a 175 size? See, I would think to get that big sound, you might need like a 125, 170 kind of 16 bat. You know what I'm talking?
Mm-hmm.
Something big like that to get that woody tone.
Yeah.
So
I think it's perfectly obvious what the body shape should be.
what's that?
Well, you just take,
A new design?
no, you take the 6-string neck and you just draw the rest of it where it should be, but keep that one side the same, and the other side should be a more normal guitar.
So like a 20 fret neck. In other words, it would retain that.
Yeah, do the same guitar.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's the thing people don't realize too. See, those have a neck tin in them just like a Les Paul. So there's actually, the neck tenor runs all the way across the guitar from side to side, and then the necks are, but the funny thing about the EMS style is that neck block moves. It's not in the same place. So sometimes you'll open one of those up and you cannot see the inside of the guitar from either of the pickups. Some of them, they're completely closed, and so in the EMS it moved back and forth. It was not in the same exact place every time.
It would not be difficult to design a single neck version.
Right.
What about are all the double
And you
necks
could
20
keep the
fret?
same basic aesthetic.
Right.
I don't think I've ever seen a 22 fret double neck. They're all 20. Even the later solid body ones are always 20, right?
Yeah, I don't think I've seen one. It would have had to have been a one-off if it did.
Well, I think that it would be better if you were going to do one to do a 22 fret.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
What are the ones
that
that
would
you?
not be hard. Engineering it would be easy.
Yeah, I could see. I see what you're saying. It would look cool. What are the ones you have that you didn't bring? That you have?
I've still got I've got 3 of the SG style, and then I have another EMS that actually needs a lot of work that I actually got from you. That Eric put the deal together, and it's actually got L5 appointments. So it has an ebony board and then the flower pot on the headstock.
SG styles are nowhere near as
Yeah.
interesting.
So when
I
you
agree.
I noticed you say the word EMS. When you say that, you mean that's what you call Hollowbodies?
Well, no. When I talk about EMS, I'm specifically talking about that body shape, the 6 with either an octave or a mandolin or whatever.
When you're talking about Hollowbody double necks.
Well, I disproportionately own so many of the EMS. By default, most of the time I'm talking about one because that's just what I've owned.
Right.
So,
so you wouldn't. Okay. So like, they used. They used EMS later with the solid bodies? Yeah. They used
yeah, but it had the same shape as the 612.
I see. Okay. Right. What is the rarest of the solid body double necks? The most coveted one?
Well, the EMS is going to be the most rare because according to the ledgers, it's supposed they made like 13 or 18. So hey, there's not many of those. I've owned 2 of those. The first one was black and was actually owned by Barbara Mandrell. And they're great guitars. There's something about double necks that, and years ago, this is probably going back 10 or 15 years ago, you dinged me on something one time at the Nashville Guitar Show. As you were walking off, you said something to me like, yeah, well, there aren't any bad sounding 70s double, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And it kind of caught me off guard because you went somewhere I wasn't expecting you to go. But you're right about that. It's like even the 70s double necks.
They're great.
There's something about that big chunk of wood.
They sound great.
They just got muscle.
They are.
And you can't,
Yeah, man.
and that's what I was going back saying about even with the Hollowbody, if you're going to make one, do you use a bigger body like the double neck body? Just because
that's the sound.
I mean, to me, you'd have to at least make 2. You'd have to make one with a big body and then one with a small body, and just see, do they sound different?
Right.
You got to go there.
Right. I would definitely agree with you. I've owned 2 Hollowbody double necks. One was the one that Jimmy Rivers owned. It was a 59 EDS 1275.
white one?
Yeah, I owned that for a while.
Really?
Yeah, and
Wow.
I sold it to Mike Reeder a while
I know.
back.
I know.
Yeah, and but
I
I've
didn't know
noticed
you owned it.
I've noticed that both of the ones that I've had, that one there, I would the word dark would be an adjective I would use to describe the sound. They're like they're not bad dark. It's like good dark.
Yeah.
Like, is spruce known as being a dark wood, George, in general? Dark sounding?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay. So I wonder what's causing that sort of...
There's plenty of bright sounding acoustic guitars that have spruce tops.
Sure.
I think it's just that mass of the body.
Yeah.
Because it's just so big.
Yeah.
Because you also have to think about this too. It's not even just the body. You got another neck. That factors into the resonance.
Totally.
So,
Probably more than we think.
In fact, if you the ultimate test would be to get an EMS, an EDS, and an EBS, and just see if the 6-string side sounds different on all 3 of those, because all 3 have different necks on the other side.
The ultimate test, we could just build one with a single neck and see how it sounds.
What was shit? Let's get started on it.
Well,
Let's do it.
he's got a good point, but think of it this way too. On the SG style, we already have that.
Right.
We already got an SG, and it don't sound like a double neck.
That's true. That's true. That's very true.
So the thing to do would be to take a double neck and then saw the second neck off. See if it sounds different.
Or just leave the neck on there, just don't put strings on it. All right, friends, I think that concludes our episode. I appreciate you guys being
No, I want to thank you. I want to thank you because to be in just a room with you 2 guys talking about this sort of stuff, this is like a lifelong sort of like moment come true. So thank you.
Yeah, and I've been telling you should definitely write a book about this. Are you going to do that?
Yeah, that's a commitment.
man, you should.
It's
do
a
it.
commitment. I'm still moving to Nashville.
There's
so.
no one that knows more about this shit than you. You should definitely write a book.
Well, I think that if I did it, it would have to be. It would have to encompass something else, like Carina and maybe Burst or something like that, and
No.
just do the trilogy.
Doublenecks, man. Just write it about doublenecks,
Yeah.
man. It'd be amazing.
Well,
Well, if you sold one copy of the book to every single person who owns one, you wouldn't make any money.
right, I would end up with all the copies at my house.
But when you say in
One of
closing,
the problems, even on things like somebody wants to, if you want to write a book about Stromberg guitars,
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
yeah, they didn't make enough of them if you
Yeah.
sold one to every single person
Right.
in the world who owns one.
Right.
but don't you think that I've always thought that the Hollowbody doublenecks were not talked about as much as they should be in history. Like no one knows.
Well, you bring up an
anything about
interesting.
that.
You brought up something that
Well,
I.
very few people have actually played
Right.
one.
That's
You
true.
brought up something that I'm surprised none of us touched on,
Right.
which is like, where is this going forward? And I've always thought that the double necks of all the kind of golden era Gibsons that were made, the double necks were by far the most underrated.
Totally,
Underrated, undervalued, under everything.
100%.
And the thing is, if you look at it like this, if you just make that comparison, this is why like even doing a book on double necks, Carinas, and bursts, I think has some validity, is that they kind of fall in a genre of stuff people like. And the Carina stuff, you know, you always have to worry, is it real?
Right.
You know, because there's so much chicanery going on with those guitars, and it's
Right.
all been talked to death. And anybody that buys one of those or even thinks about buying one knows about it. See, here's the thing: the Carina stuff is actually above the burst stuff in terms of value, in
Yeah.
terms of like what people are willing to pay. The double necks are the least of the three, but the double necks of all of those, you ain't buying a fake. There
No,
are no
and
fakes.
there's no fakes.
So when you get one, you got the real deal. So
Dude.
you get.
Or you don't have the one that Shot Jackson did at least. Is
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you can
You're
find one
right.
that's been monkeyed with because
he didn't put the original finish back
yeah,
on.
I've seen some that have been butchered because
Yeah.
I mean they were artist guitars. People did actually play those. In fact, because if you custom ordered it, you were probably going to play it. But
You're right though. You won't see a forgery on one of these.
Yeah.
There's no way.
So the
Yeah.
thing is, it's unique aesthetically, just like the Carina is. It's unique sound wise, just like the Carina is, and it's rare, just like the Carina is.
And many of them, though, were rather unusual in terms of, like, you know, a tenor neck and a
Right.
mandolin neck, or
Right.
a four-string mandolin and
Sure.
an eight-string mandolin.
Right.
Sure.
That limits appeal, so only
Right.
a few of them are in a format that most people would relate
Right.
to.
Right.
Well, but that goes back to why the 6-string neck is so incredibly important on those guitars,
Yeah.
Even
because
that
that's where you're going to
double neck.
live.
That's it. Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
they call their guitar and mandolin the octave neck.
Right.
It's not, that octave neck's not all that useful.
It's useful in the. We've talked about this.
Yeah,
Put
yeah.
it in the middle, dial that volume
Oh,
back,
yeah.
and just find that sweet
I
spot, and
love
you
it
got it.
personally,
You got
but
it.
I could see how somebody wouldn't. But I love it. I personally.
Well, most
love
people
it.
are not
Yeah.
really when it comes down to the people that buy those sort of guitars. They're
Yeah.
not players like yourself.
No, man.
They're just not.
Yeah, thank you, man. But enough about that. You guys are awesome. Thanks for being on the show. I'll put this
Yeah,
video
the fact
together.
is, though, on the double neck, where you have a 6-string standard and the octave 6, you know, you do on a standard guitar have plenty of notes, like
Yeah.
you got a Les Paul
Yeah, yeah.
or a 335, you know, after the 12th fret, you still have 10 more to go.
Yeah, yeah.
And so most of the notes that you have on that octave neck are
Pretty tight.
still duplicated.
And you know what's funny
it's
too
pretty
is
tight,
now,
yeah,
now that,
pretty
that he's
tight.
talking about that, it made me
Yeah.
realize something too. It's like,
Yeah.
why did they never make one for Les Paul?
Right.
Because you know he played that octave
Yeah.
guitar, and it's like that was he would have been a natural for that guitar,
Totally, yeah.
but he never had one, at least not to my
That's
knowledge.
crazy. That's amazing.
He could have changed the world doing that, you know.
Well, I'm going to change the world with it. All right, you guys. We're hanging up. Love you guys. Thank you
Awesome.
for being a part of this. All right. This is a real treat, Holmes.
So, Eric,
We got done with this whole video, and as we're packing up the guitars, we realized we left out the most important part
Right.
of the story.
I mean that was the impetus for this whole thing is the 612 that I just got, the 61.
The one at the start of the video. The
The one
sunburst
that
one.
I had chased for 42
Yes,
years
yes.
and had been looking the one that started me out on the quest. I had literally since the 80s, every time I was at a guitar show, you know, looking at somebody's collection in a store or whatever, if I saw one, I would write the serial number down and photograph it if I could. And I just started cataloging every one that I could find.
Yes.
And, but still looking for that 612, that, you know, the kryptonite that I missed. And a buddy of mine, Jim Craddock, who is a guitar guru guy who hails from Memphis, who is now in Greensboro, North Carolina, he sends me a photo of that guitar, and as soon as I got it, I'm like, oh.
You knew it was it.
I know that guitar. That's Louie's old Doubleneck. And all I knew is that it had gone to Fayetteville. And I'm like, okay, Fayetteville, Greensboro, what are we talking? That's stone's throw.
Right.
So I said, yeah, I know that guitar. You know, what's the deal with it? And basically, he had gotten approached by another dealer who was not interested in it. And so Jim got in touch with the person that was actually trying to sell the guitar. And he threw out some very high numbers, and the guy did not bite. You know, like, surprisingly, I had a number like kind of what you paid for yours.
Right.
And so anyway, Jim's keeping me involved in this process. This is about, like I say, about 2 years ago when that happened. And it was, and I knew it was going to be a tough nut to crack because the dollar amount where it was going to land.
Yeah.
And he went around with the guy for literally 2 years trying to buy it.
Yeah.
And last August, he sends me a photo. He got it. And we just started discussing numbers, like, you know, six-figure numbers. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's going to be a tough nut to crack, particularly with everything I had going on, moving to Nashville.
Right.
My business was largely kind of MIA during a lot of that because, you know, I'm moving and renovating my place in Nashville and renovating my place in South Carolina.
Yeah.
And so the timing was horrible. Could be much worse in the summer. And I said, well, the only alternative I really have to do this. I mean, there were a few others, but the default move was to just sell my house in South Carolina.
Right.
But I still had my wood shop there and was literally working out of it every time I would go back to South Carolina to repair stuff.
Right.
So I was like, okay, now I got to get on that horse and do that. So literally I started in August preparing to do that. And it literally took 6 months to get the house completely cleaned out, the garage cleaned out, moved, on the market, sold. And I closed on the house on a Friday and drove on a Saturday and picked up the guitar.
Damn.
So it was, you know, I owe it all to Jim Craddock.
Wow, that's
Jim
great.
Craddock, you know, he delivered. Without him, it would have never made its way to me. And for me to end up with that particular guitar after 42 years is amazing. So I owe it all to Jim. Nobody else.
Man, that's great. I hope to meet him someday.
He's a great guy. You'll love him.
Absolutely. All right, Eric. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
All right.